Welcome to GovTech Guidance, your resource for everything you could want to know about the role of technology in government. Today, we're talking about tips for maximizing your relief funding. Today, I'm Mark Indelicato, Content Marketing Specialist and your moderator for the day. We have Reed Perryman. Reed is our Director of Public Sector Sales here at RCN Technologies. And representing Synnex, we have Mike Gambrell, SLED Vertical Alliance Manager, and Brent Odom, Manager of Government Policy, Funding, and Affairs. How are you guys doing today?
Good. Thanks for having us, Mark.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm just glad I got through all those introductions. There's a lot of acronyms and big words in there. So, but cool. Yeah, I think we're gonna have a good show today.
Okay, Mark. Thanks. As Mark said, Brent and me will be given an overview of state and local funding as we see it now. But really, what I like to start out with is the fact of what is as we look across the United States, what is state and local government as it's known today, and many don't realize that there's over 19 million employees in state and local government. And when it comes to IT technology, then $3.25 trillion spend. And as we roll over, into the next slide here, it's really an industry of industries. A lot of people look at it as 50 states, but you start thinking about it, and it's over 19,000 cities, over 3,000 counties, over 16,000 townships. We even have special districts, over 38,000 of them. Really it is an industry of industries when you start breaking down state and local government and look at the different needs that are out there relative to technology. And we must remember, RCN, what are we trying to do for you that are in the audience today? Provide reliable and dependable solutions that's going to help you solve a problem. So through that integration of technology, it's going to help you solve that problem. So I always like to preface our presentation with those two slides to just give you that overall vision of state and local government. But Brent, I'm going to pass it over to you now and let you talk about some of the relief funds that we've seen over the last year and a half.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. So if we think back to last May is really when the first big package came out, and everybody CARES Act. Everybody's been talking about that. So if we look at state and local government specifically, I put together this cheat sheet chart really to look at all of the funds that have come out for state and local governments on this slide specifically. If you go back to the CARES Act, we have the Coronavirus Relief Fund. And really, the big thing about this one is that the deadline was extended. Remember, it was originally December of 2020. Now it's extended until the end of this year, December. So have a little ways to go on spending those funds. Really, the encouragement or suggestion would be spend these funds first, okay? Because that deadline is coming up. And then we jump to the second package, which is not on here because it did not include any state and local funds. It just extended the CARES Act deadline. But then we get to the American Rescue Plan Act. And that was passed a couple of months ago. And it's the largest package. It's got the most money really ever for relief funding down to state, local, and education organizations. And so we can see that what the bill did was split it out into a couple of different funds. So there's the state fiscal recovery fund, the local fiscal recovery fund, the tribal fiscal recovery fund, and then there's a capital projects fund. Now, what's different about the ARP funds is that every city and county or local government should be receiving some of these funds. Now, the CARES Act was a little bit different because only cities and counties that were over 500,000 got direct payments, and then the state had to decide, the legislature of each state had to decide if they were going to divvy out some of their funds to the other local government. But in the ARP Act, it did provide for every city, county, state, municipality, tribal government to receive some funding. And the big thing here is the deadline goes out to December of 2024. So there is a bit of a runway, a couple of years here. We know that, you know, buying and projects and solutions are becoming more strategic right now, rather than that immediate rush spend. So there is quite a bit of runway here on those funds. There's a capital projects fund. Basically, the law states that a minimum of $100 million is going to each state. So it allows $10 billion overall, but a minimum of $100 million is going to each state. So you can see in parentheses there from the actual bill what it's meant to do. It's meant for the state to use it to enable, you know, remote hybrid work, education, healthcare monitoring, you know, in response to the public health emergency. So really, each state would then decide how they're going to spend their allotment of this capital projects fund to in response to the COVID-19 or the public health emergency. Okay, if we go to the next slide. Just looking at state and local governments in general, the budgets and the economy, we know that these relief funds have really helped avoid kind of a worst case scenario. You know, with my role reading through, you know, city and county, you know, industry organizations, they are very, very relieved for these funds to have come down from the federal government to help right now, because budgets are so uncertain. We know that, you know, the financial impacts have been affected by tourism taxes, hospitality taxes, depending on what state you're in. And so really, if we look at IT, we've put 3 on the screen from some of the analysts that we work with, economic analysts. Really, in the IT spend, we see a worst, a most likely, and a best case scenario. So we do know that a lot of this relief funding will be used to procure technology solutions just in general across the board, to help meet the needs of states and cities and counties and school districts and universities and all of that. So just wanted to kind of paint a picture of kind of what we're expecting, or what we're seeing and some of our analysts are saying regarding the budgets.
And hey, Brent, I think it's something though to, think about the fact that, here you was as a former high school principal, me as a retired police chief, and back in 08, 9, and 10, we were there as end users when the Great Recession came through. And if you start thinking about it from that aspect, it was a stimulus package like we see with this stimulus package that's coming out now that helped resurrect our budgets. But I mean, we were there having to cut our budgets, as much as 10%, and that was seen, throughout the nation. But I know me and you both as end users had to do that. And then from the aspect of looking at this, overall as far as the impact, many economists that we were listening to was saying, hey, listen, the budget shortfall is going to be as great or greater with COVID as it was with the Great Recession that we went through. But like you had in that the last bullet there, 21 states are actually better off, and have more in the budget. They hadn't been impacted as greatly, and we see that states it's more, based on the property taxes versus the hospitality taxes.
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, taxes are a huge factor from state to state. another factor is rainy day funds or contingency funds. Here in South Carolina, where you and I are, we're required to have a balanced budget every year in the state legislature, and then they're required by our Constitution to roll over a certain percentage into a rainy day or contingency fund. That's different from state to state depending on the Constitution. But you do see some states who have done that over time, and they're prepared for something like this. It's just like in our personal budgets. We have an emergency fund, we save up, and when we get to a issue or obstacle, we can use that to help take care of it. State government, local governments are the same way. So we're just seeing it different because each state's different. They operate differently. They do things differently. So.
Yeah. And then too, Brent, as we've been talking about and working together and traveling across the country and looking at the end users. We really classified the solutions that are important to end users into these three categories. So these are all technologies that RCN can bring you, those in the audience with us today, and we look at it really from to help everybody involved, kind of the three-pillar approach, even though there's many solutions underneath them. What we've seen, as a result of COVID, is more remote work, and you see that internally with state and local government. I've seen some forecasts as high as 50+% of state and local governments now going to be working from anywhere. I don't want to say necessarily working from home, but working from that anywhere approach. And at the same time, you have cities that are building out safe city, smart city, IoT solutions, and are actually competing against one another. Looking at the connectivity side. So you have connectivity as far as the importance of that. Connecting these smart devices. Both on the internal side, for you in the audience, relative to state and local government, and those citizens that you're trying to attract into your city to give you, a greater residential population there, and those that you serve, that are even coming into your city for services that you provide. So it's really looking at an enhanced quality of life for everybody through the integration of technology, and you get into, software as a service, the hybrid works options, all the different smart devices, like I said, that's going on out there. Well, if you've got all of the if the connectivity is such a importance, which it is today, across our society with 5G coming on and the ability to have that connectivity, then you've got to look at the legacy technology. So from a state and local perspective, looking at the fact that, hey, there's old legacy technology that's being utilized, being able to modernize that to where you would be able to have the connectivity with these smart devices, both on the internal and external side, as you're providing really digital services in this day and time, instead of the basic city services that we've seen offered historically. And then if you've got, all of the data, in this day and time, really what state and local government is going through is the digital transformation and all the big data that is coming in. You've got to have the ability to store it, to secure it, and to analyze it from a artificial intelligence standpoint. So these are categorized, and what me and Brent have really seen relative to the solutions that state and local government are looking at, in order to actually respond to their end user needs, their citizens' needs, on a daily basis. So, Brent, I'll turn it back over to you for these next two slides to talk a little bit more about this technology that I've kind of given an overview of. Oops, hold on.
Yeah, I think you were going to do this one, I think.
All right, okay. Yeah, Mark, if you just go to that next slide, I really covered this slide, from the aspect I didn't remember we had this one in there, but yet from a safe city standpoint, smart city, like what I was talking about, you see the global forecast there, in reference to the investment and how important technology is. What I found as an end user is that technology was key, and technology had to be integrated to enhance our services as a city and enhance the quality of life for all of the citizens that were coming in. I mean, we had a residential population of about 68,000, but we served nearly 300,000 on a daily basis. And so being able to provide some of this key technology, we had a public safety camera system, streaming back into our E911 center, like you see in bullet point 3 here, having that command center, being able to have the broadband, being able to now, that's taking it to the whole next level, like we talked a little bit about last week from a public safety standpoint in webinar number 1, was the whole 5G and being able to have that integration and being able to have that reliability and dependability, on a whole new level as we move forward. So all of these are key ingredients, in building a full solution that's going to solve your problems for, you and the audience today. Brent, now I will turn it over to you and let you talk a little bit about the technology that I provided the overview on.
Yeah, so Mike, you hit the nail on the head with a good introduction to what we're seeing, just kind of across the country, state and local governments, and I know everybody's been using the term the new normal, and I think it will be for a while, but I think we can definitely see how things are going to probably be for moving forward, really. Work from home for non-essential functions. I think Mike hit on this. State and local governments really struggled in the past, with remote and hybrid work options, and struggled to keep good talent because of that. That was a big thing. I did just finished a master's in public administration, and that is a huge deal right now, is attracting a talented workforce in state and local government. And, with the younger generation, the millennials in the workforce, the hybrid and work from home is a big deal. And I think state and local government is going to have to adapt moving forward to attract the talented workforce. Social distancing, meeting the workplace, of course, each state's going to be different. We're starting to see that, how leadership and is making decisions of people coming back and public buildings being open and workspaces. But I do think, depending on the state, moving forward, there will be quite a bit of social distancing practices. And how do you do that effectively? How do you use technology to to help with that? Business processes re-engineer for remote work, of course. Technology is going to have to change in order for people to work from anywhere. Modernizing, legacy systems, health and surveillance systems. What's that going to look like moving forward? There's going to be some policy issues to come along with that. But, taking people's temperature as they come in, and facial recognition and those types of things, policies that are reformed to match behavior, just as I was talking about. State and local governments are going to have to grapple with, what's the policies around all these changes. So this is definitely, what you all we know are going to be discussing and dealing with moving forward. And there are technology solutions out there to help with all of this. If we go to the next slide.
Yeah.
So really the outlook, here's some key pillars. We know that the response is going to be multi-year. We know that. Mike and I, as he alluded to, former end customers in public sector and state and local government, we dealt with this multi-year plans, 3-5-year plans, you know, and you implement certain things each year. So we know that that's gonna be the case. New solutions to help move through the recovery process. We're in the recovery phase. What does it look like to get back to some semblance of normalcy? You know, especially state and local government. Long-term aspirational areas will rapidly accelerate. These are things that we've talked about in education, in local government, cities and counties, even at the state level. We know there's things we've talked about but never got done. We're forced now because of what happened. So things like increased cybersecurity, methods to protect, you know, vulnerabilities. This is happening a lot at the federal level right now. And so we know that that's having to happen at the state and local levels as well. You know, surveillance, telehealth, remote work, again, automation, IT modernizations, distance learning. What does that look like? And, you know, I was former principal, so what's that look like moving forward? You know, to retain students in your district and, you know, not have them leaving to go to, you know, private or for-profit entities and risk losing that, student-based costs, those types of things. So this is really kind of what we're seeing as the big bet areas moving forward. We know that is being discussed. So.
Yeah, I think this was all really interesting. I think one of the biggest takeaways that I can see is a lot of these things and a lot of these solutions really existed before, and they were kind of starting to creep into the public sphere. But the pandemic really just took them and ran with them, you know, as a necessity, right? For a lot, especially a lot of these remote and just a lot of the more advanced IoT applications that I've seen.
Yeah, great point, Mark. Yeah, that's exactly what we've seen, you know, in looking at state and local government across the nation, and that's why we've brought in, you know, just to, you know, for those in the audience, you know, some stats and a breakdown there, so you know what, you know, others are doing across the country, and you know what you're seeing here in your own backyard is what's being seen all across the country. You know, like Brent said before, it's state by state breakdown, that you might have a different template put in there, you know, in reference to the technology, but it's still pretty much the same type of technology breakdown, and really it is amplified. It's almost like you know, putting this you know, some of this technology on steroids, you might say, in reference to COVID and the whole response and the management of this pandemic.
What are the current stimulus funds that are available in SLED? So Brent, we'll pitch that to you first. And
yeah. So I think we went over this in one of the previous slides. You know, there is a couple of different packages that we discussed. You know, CARES Act was first. That deadline's coming up. ARP is really the big one right now. And those funds for state and local government at least go out until 2024. And, you know, something we didn't talk about, and I'll kind of interject that here, is the education funds. And so really education is the huge bet right now because of so much of the funding going straight into education. I mean, you've got CARES Act, you've got the second one, that COVID relief package, and then you've got ARP funds. And so it dispersed it into K-12, it dispersed it into higher ed, and then it gives the governors of each state their own funding to disperse out how they see fit in their own state between K-12 and higher ed. And so you've got a lot going into education right now, you know, in the different areas. The way I like to define it was, you know, just looking at the laws themselves. The CARES Act was to respond to the health pandemic immediately, just immediate response to COVID and everybody being sent home. The second package, that COVID relief package that was signed into law in January of this year, really the language in that law was to facilitate kind of the hybrid and the interim, distance learning, hybrid learning, work for state and local governments. And then the third package, ARP, really, if you look at all the language in that law, it's designed to help reopen. And so you've got, schools that need to be reopened, state and local governments that need to be reopened. And so, a lot of the provisions in the ARP Act, even down to, for example, our state superintendent here in South Carolina was talking about ARP funds being used for construction and remodeling of school buildings so that kids can come back in, HVA systems remodified, connectivity boosted in the schools, those types of things to get kids back into school. So those ARP funds are really designed by the language in the law to reopen and kind of get people back into work and into school and those types of things. So,
awesome. Mike, I'll point that over to you.
Yeah, Mark, building a little bit off of what Brent was saying, and I take myself back to my my former end user days, and putting our budget together, and dealing with some of these top crises that we've had through the years in the history of our nation at state and local government level. And like what Brent was talking about, I think it's something very familiar to everybody in the audience is hey, let's look at this the breakdown of this stimulus funding and say, hey, that first part came out relative to our response. What technology do we need right away in order to manage this pandemic? And then, as you start moving forward, it's how we typically work in state and local government. And it's looking then at, hey, now that we are, past that initial shock, what types of technologies is going to help us through the remainder of this, and then in order to handle it better the next time. I mean, the phrase that we often use is SWOT analysis, and it's not back from my former SWAT days, SWAT, it's SWOT. Looking at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, and looking at that from a technology perspective on what type of technology we can integrate to enhance our abilities at state and local government and better serve our citizens and provide services for our citizens. And so like what Brent was talking about relative to, there's newer technologies too. We might have been talking about surveillance cameras, but now throwing that thermal imagery on there, as we've opened up city halls and police departments and different facilities, and looking at some of that technology that is going to help us in the future if this comes around again. And then two, I think it was key for state and local government. Many times we have to turn back in funds if we don't use them. And so the federal government, our president and Congress back in December said, hey, listen, okay, there's $14 billion out here that's unspent, leading up to the end of December. We're going to throw you a bone, you might say, and we're going to continue that. All we're going to do with this one for state and local government is we're just going to continue it till December the 30th of 2021. So, I think that was, a big positive for us in state and local government to look at it from that aspect. Hey, we didn't have to turn funds back in because they were unspent, but now we get a continuation of it. And that's why Brent was saying, hey, spend that first because you got 3 years to spend the new stimulus money that's coming down, even though many are going to go ahead and spend that new stimulus money that came down in February through the American Rescue Plan, because there is technology that we're going to need to integrate at state and local government. One of them, huge cybersecurity. Just look at the Colonial Pipeline. Look at the water system down in Florida that that was hacked into. A lot of different defenses that we've got to look at, relative to, our attacks now coming through technology and not so much, a armed force moving into our country.
Yeah, absolutely. Reed, you got anything to add to that?
Yeah, the only thing that I'll add is I've been following the FCC really closely, specifically around the E-rate program as it pertains to connectivity, technology, and education. And we've talked a lot about what the CARES Act did in terms of the initial response to COVID and what that plan was, especially for schools. So in many districts, you were able to see finally the rollout of one-to-one devices to kids and to teachers to completely take that learning virtually, along with partnerships with carriers, Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile, to get the internet access hotspots out there. But one thing that was never allowed on the E-rate program, that stream of grant funding for connectivity, was LTE related products, so cellular related products. Well, the FCC recently passed some new policy, a fund, it's called the COVID-19 Emergency Connectivity Fund, that allots certain monies towards the procurement of LTE-enabled endpoints and 5G-enabled endpoints for the purpose of expanding a school's virtual learning, digital learning, online learning capabilities. So what we're seeing, and I've talked to an E-rate consultant about it, but there is a category for what they term as hotspots, being basically any kind of modem or router that provides internet connectivity, $250 allotted to that. I suspect many carriers out there are going to match that $250 with a bill incentive credit on their end to help finance anything that might be over that original $250. Then, of course, anything over the balance for a more enterprise solution, like cradle points on your bus fleet, so you can have an active connected fleet for your buses, park those to the community to offer Wi-Fi in underserved areas, etc. The rest of that will come out of their capital expense budget that they might have. So the other part of that is it allocates $450 to connected devices, which, according to the E-rate consultant I spoke to, is more along the lines of, say, a Chromebook that is compatible with LTE. Any computing device that allows a kid or a staff faculty member to connect directly to the internet without the need of any kind of USB modem, jetpack, hotspot, router, you name it. So that's a really exciting thing. Now, whether these things remain permissible in E-rate after these funds are allocated, that's the big question. We're hopeful for those of us in the cellular world. I think education needs to go that way. And I think the timing is actually quite good. You stack that on top of the remaining CARES funds, some of these other funds that have been approved. But the state of Tennessee is allowing virtual schools per district for the first time, right? That's something exciting and new. So I think in Knox County, you'll have one high school and one middle school completely online, completely virtual all year. So these monies are going to go a long way towards supporting that effort in a lot of communities at the local level across the states. So that's what I would have to add to this.
Yeah, that was a great answer. Awesome. So really, it's just going to take us into our next question here. What are some of the biggest trends that you all are seeing in SLED that are being used for relief funds, or that are using relief funds, sorry, to purchase? And we'll start with Brent again.
Yeah, I really think, going back to just what Reed was talking about, not only, cellular, but connectivity in general. You've just got states that are dealing with the rural connectivity issue and the divide. You've got legislatures that are allocating a good little bit of their money for, rural broadband access. So I think connectivity in general, this is, the past year has highlighted the need for connectivity. Remote work, remote learning, work anywhere, hybrid situations. And so, there is quite a bit of funding, and what we see as trends across the country, a lot of states really focusing on allocating some of their funding to help with connectivity over the next few years.
Yeah, absolutely. Mike, what do you have to add to that?
I think that's a key word, in state and local government today is connectivity. I know Reed and Brent both have mentioned it, our previous question and Brent on this one. But that's essential because what are we trying to do, with IoT type solutions for smart city? We are really trying to connect smart devices. And when you start thinking about that, I know we've talked about education, our from that side of state and local government, as a whole. Last week in public safety, we talked about, computing on the edge, being able to put gateway devices with your chosen carriers in first responder vehicles. Well, in this day and time, here we are talking about this funding that's coming down and all of the lack of broadband, across our nation, and being able to offer technology. Reed talked about it in the last question relative to, some of this funding that's coming down. Some of these provision that's being made for E-rate. Well, think about it from this aspect. If you use a case example here relative to education. When we was going through COVID, of course, everything was going virtual. And so being able to look at it from, connecting these Chromebooks, connecting these smart devices. Well, how, if I'm a child living in an area with a lack of broadband connectivity, how am I going to perform virtual learning? So being able to, just like we talked about last week of putting a gateway device and your chosen carrier in a first responder vehicle, you can do the same thing with a school bus. And so there's many schools around the nation now that have started implementing that. And so it allows the child with that Chromebook connecting these smart devices like what we're talking about, being able to do their homework to and from school by using that essentially ruggedized router that's in the school bus to bring it back. But then that poured on another as our COVID started moving forward, a whole nother problem because then you started seeing some of the states saying, "Hey, we're going to send some of the kids back." So now they're having to send them back. So what they were doing is they were placing these school buses in community center parking lots and church parking lots in the lack of broadband connectivity areas that they knew that they had around the county, that they would be able to, the kids would be able to actually log on and utilize that to perform virtual learning. Well, now, okay, hey, hold on. Now we're going to be taking as much as 50% of the student body back to the schools. Well, guess what? You got to put the school buses back on the road. So then from that aspect, okay, I've still got 50%, and many of them are in these areas that don't have broadband connectivity. So me and Brent worked with an IT director for a large school district, and he had 40 of such areas, and he had placed those school buses, 40 school buses, having that solution, placed them in community centers or, around the county. But then, okay, hey, now I've got all my, I don't have all, 50% of my kids returning back. What's my solution now? So he had $237,000 of CARES Act money, and we introduced a solution that is a ruggedized box with solar panels on top. You place your gateway device and your chosen carrier in it, mounted on a pole. That's how he spent his $237 to solve his problem. Back to what I talked about in the beginning, being able to integrate technology that's going to solve a problem for you. And so that's what we've seen. And it gets back to what I was talking about in the previous question. Okay, hey, here was technology that we assessed, like that school district said, hey, I've got technology in these school buses that I can disperse into my community and provide virtual learning for those that don't have broadband connectivity. But then as the pandemic went on and things changed, then you've got to be able to change as a state and local government and be able to offer different solutions. And so that's what they were doing. And that's how, just an example of how somebody at a school district level spent this money. But you're talking about a a technology that moved forward. You can take that same technology, for those of you on in the audience today, on state and local government, and move it into city buses, into public transportation, altogether. And you can use the same solution that we've seen a lot with first responders all the way through state and local government.
Yeah, absolutely. Reed, do you have anything to add on to that?
Yeah, I just I want to underscore connectivity just in a slightly different way. I think we all know at this point that just look over the next 5 to 10 years and imagine how many more viable jobs are going to be created by the technology industry, and how critical it is for a lot of these outlying and rural communities that might not have good access to high-speed internet, that are missing the boat on those opportunities. So if you want to prevent mass exodus from rural communities into urban centers, and still allow those communities to thrive as they have for years and years and years, then I'll underscore connectivity again. That's pretty paramount. And now through a lot of these funds, they have the opportunity to not only partner with carriers and ISP providers, but also to partner with technology providers that can provide that last mile infrastructure to make that wireline or that wireless service work.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great answer. You guys are being thorough. You're already dipping into the next question. So what technology solutions are important to SLED as we begin to come out of the pandemic? So we talked a little bit about the about the past and modern day, but I mean, what's tomorrow look like? What's a year? What's 5 years look like? Right. So Brent, if you want to tee us off there.
Yeah, and I'm just going to add in the last question too. Interesting solutions that we've seen being implemented. I think that these can go together in the essence of time. So, important, I think right now, if we break it down, safely reopening is important. Just as I was talking about with the ARP funds, this last package, it's really meant to help reopen. And so it's going to depend state by state. But safely reopening public buildings, schools, courthouses, city hall, county square, state and local government in general, safely reopening, and how can technology solutions help do that? And I think another area, if you look at specifically education, is the learning loss. That's something that's talked about. It's a term right now being used heavily in education. Is addressing the learning loss from when students went home. They maybe didn't have connectivity. We struggled to get devices. Some places it might have worked. Other places it might not have. Some students it worked well or better than others. And so now we're struggling with how to catch students up, now that they're returning and coming back. And so, that learning loss is going to, need solutions, just like what Reed was talking about from the connectivity fund. That's what that fund was created for and to address, help kids who don't have connectivity, give connectivity on bus rides to and from school, help with summer enrichment camps, get connectivity to summer school, and those types of programs. And so I think that is a very important solution moving forward. Let me tell you about an interesting solution that just on the top of my mind being implemented with some of these funds. So a fairly large school district in Arkansas is using these funds to create safe zones of connectivity throughout their community. And so what they've done is they've worked to create a Google heat map or just a heat map that's on their district website, and it identifies areas that are low in connectivity, especially like Reed was talking about, more rural areas or communities across the district. And then what that district is doing is working with leaders at safe zones, whether it be churches, whether it be community centers, a YMCA that may have an after-school program where a lot of kids go to, or a summer program where kids are, you know, apartment complexes that, you know, low, you know, disadvantaged communities, you know, or urban communities may have apartment complexes where a large majority of students live, but some of them may not have connectivity. So they're working to identify those areas, and then they're putting routers, branch routers, gateway devices, and they're putting them in those safe zones, and then identifying those safe zones on their heat map so that parents can, if they need connectivity, there's all sorts of reasons why they may be moving, and so they may be without internet for 2 weeks or a week, and they, you know, they may have just moved to the area and they may not have internet. They may have lost a job and they may not have internet. There's all sorts of reasons, and so that heat map is there for parents and students to access through the district website, and then they've used the relief funding to put all these routers out at safe zones, and you know, pay the connectivity or the carrier charges, those types of things. So
awesome, yeah, that's really cool. Mike, what are you seeing down the pike as far as SLED solutions?
Well, I'll use that word again, connectivity, you know, and the importance of it. And, you know, here we are talking about connecting smart devices, but I think from a state and local government, we've got to look at it, you know, back to that overview that I provided in our slide presentation relative to the old legacy technology that's being used, and realizing that we now are, you know, in that phase through digital transformation that we're at state and local government level, we're having to offer digital services instead of our traditional city services. So when you start looking at connecting smart devices, both internally and externally, from a state and local government perspective, you got to have collaborative platforms, you know, to be able to, so that legacy technology has to be modernized. You know, some of the data centers have to be modernized from a state and local government perspective. Looking at, you know, if you've traditionally looked at, you know, on-premise solutions, looking at cloud solutions, and getting into the whole IoT perspective, blending in that artificial intelligence that provides you an enhancement, you know, for your services overall. And, you know, then you start looking at, you know, I talked about it previously in the last question, you know, in reference to bringing it, you know, past, you know, our initial response to COVID to where we are now. And okay, how are we going to be able to provide you know, the proper management of a pandemic if it occurs again, and I think that's key in reference to you know, hey, here 5G's coming on, here being able to modernize your legacy technology, looking at solutions that's going to assist you. So, you know, now that we've got businesses in our communities returning to work, we've got, you know, more state and local government facilities opening back up to the public, that thermal technology coming in and being able to provide, you know, an extra layer to that. But that's all fitting in with, you know, what I really think is, you know, foundational, that from a state and local government perspective, as we move, you know, as we move from here on, you know, with some of this money, we've got to modernize, you know, what we have currently on the IT technology side.
Yeah, absolutely. Reed, same question. What's interesting to you that you've seen?
Yeah, I don't know. I think Brett and Mike covered pretty much the gambit pretty pervasively there. I would say, just with our big emphasis on connectivity, security goes hand in hand with that, with more connected endpoints out there, whether that's across a school district or a local or state government agency. It's absolutely paramount that they protect their network and protect their data as well. So first line deployment might be that connectivity piece. Without it, there's not a big need for security. But after that, they immediately need to use what remaining funding is available. And there's a lot, as we've gone through, to appropriately protect their endpoints ultimately protecting home base, their data centers, all the data that's being collected and that might be under lock and key and generally unsafe to get out to the public. So that's what I would add on.